Howdy YouTube, Eznix here with a little update on the EznixOS project here. I know about a week and a half ago I spun up what I thought would be some final ISOs for EznixOS based on Debian 12 and also a respin of the Debian 11 ISOs as well. However, after looking at some of my choices and realizing that I wanted to finally get the installer icon unbranded from Debian and branded to EznixOS. So I chose this as a good excuse to fix some little issues like the branding, as well as figure out why, and it was pretty easy, that Calamares did not remove itself previously when installed. So we fixed both problems. So we're going to go over some of those changes. However, we're going to start the installer and let it start running, because one of the consequences of removing Calamares during the installation is that the removal of packages takes significantly longer. But it will give us a chance to go over some of the other changes. So let's go ahead and start the installer. We do have to mark it executable. I guess I could always change that as well, but so you can see the installer icon is now my icon. It says install EznixOS rather than install Debian. So that is the only real change here. The other change is that it's now running in debug mode. Very nice. So let's go ahead and click next. Change our zone here. Keyboard should be fine, US English. We do have drop down for file system. So let's go ahead and choose something that seems to be more interesting these days. And we can see we're getting a 1 gigabyte EFI system. I settled on 1 gigabyte just to be safe, just in case. I know Debian does store multiple boot images depending on how many kernels you have lying around. Well, at least I believe they do. And 1 gig seemed sufficient without being wasteful. Give our user a name here. Give it a password. And it is automatically selected use same password for administrator account, which will give sudo access to the user. Next, an overview of what will happen. And let's get it installing. Cool. So it will create the partitions, format them, and start to copy the squashfs file system of the live ISO onto the hard drive. Now, while this is running, let's take a look at the home folder here. In the home folder, there is an EznixOS folder, and this is a link to the folder in the USR share directory. Contains all the build files. Now, let's open up, we'll do it with Guinea, why not? Open up the build script itself first. Let's make this a little bigger, turn on line wrapping. Okay, so a couple of changes in here. I did separate out more effectively, I think, what makes up the Xfce desktop as well as some choices of software that really only would apply within the Xfce desktop, and then all other software. I know that was always a stated separation, but it was never really all that separate, all that defined. So that, I hope, will clear up some issues with people who want to modify this, replacing the desktop but keeping most of the software. Now, things like Asunder, a Trill, let's see what else, Pulse Audio, those things could have gone in the general category as well. So there's always some debate over what belongs in the desktop, what belongs in a more general software category. One other change I made was, in order to change the icon and the name of the installer launcher, I did have to include what are called chroot hooks into the live build process. So I do create the hooks normal folder and then copy in the hooks I've created into that folder for the build to use. So let's go ahead and take a look at those hooks. So new directory, new files. Let's open these. The first one, enable Calamares debug hook. That, as I showed, enables the debug to pop up here, as well as toggle log to show you exactly what Calamares is doing every step of the way. So it could be very handy. And this isn't a default way to run Calamares, but I do find it can come in handy sometimes when there are problems. So let's go back to here. No, let's go back to here. Okay, so enabling the debug mode. Let's open this with Guinea. Okay, we can see that it's a simple sed command to edit text within a file. We're working with the installed Debian script, which is Debian's Calamares launcher. The Calamares is launched in a two-step process. The launcher on the desktop or in the menu calls this script, install Debian, which in turn calls Calamares, with a pkexec Calamares call. Now what I've done is, in this script, replace the line beginning with pkexec Calamares with pkexec Calamares-D, which is debug mode. That's it. That's all that hook does. And it runs after all the software is installed in the live build, but before any more configuration takes place. Take a look at the rename the installer icon hook. This is two sed commands. Now it could have been combined into one longer sed command, but I chose to, make it two. Same principle. Sed replaces or searches for and then replaces strings of text in files. We're dealing with the installed Debian.desktop file. We're looking for any instance of the word Debian spelled with a capital D and replace it with EznixOS. And the G is to specify global, which means any instance of Debian. Next, it looks for the line beginning icon equals install Debian and changes that to icon equals USR share icons default lavalamp.svg. That's it. Very simple. Those two hooks effectively make the installer my brand and also run the way I want it to run, which is in debug mode. What else has changed? Oh yeah, let's look at the Calamares settings here. Now these are the Calamares settings that are transferred into the live system. I did a bit of cleanup with the format of the modules. They should all look the same, and that would be author attribution or description, and then only the required fields, no commentary text. And they should all look that way. So, in the bootloader file, specifies grub. These settings have not changed. Specifies the bootloader EFI bootloader ID. So I do brand the EFI bootloader ID directory. So we're not stepping on any other EFI bootloader IDs that may be in use, such as Debian. We're not reusing that. It is creating a new folder in EFI, the EFI directory for EznixOS. The FS tab sets my preferred options, which are for all file systems other than BTRFS, defaults, no A time, no discard. For BTRFS, we have defaults, no A time, no auto defrag, and no discard. For swap, we just have defaults. For encrypted, we have LUX and keycrypt setting. For the EFI mount partition, which is your EFI system partition, we just have the UMask set. If it's installed on an SSD under BTRFS, we add the SSD mount option, and then settings for temp FS options. The reason I do no discard is I do not want file systems mounted in such a way that the kernel will issue discard commands to trim unused or no longer used space in the file system. Now, I do that because I don't think it's necessary on a desktop system to have that overhead running all the time. And it's also, from what I've read, depends on the manufacturer of the drive whether it's even really that effective or even destructive. So I'd rather not have discard run as a rule. However, what I do is in the system services configuration, I do make sure the FS trim timer is set. What this does, FS trim runs a weekly timer to run the trim command, which will effectively do what discard does, but on a scheduled once a week basis. I think that's a much better idea for a desktop system. What else do I do? In the mount configuration for BTRFS, I go a bit further than Debian does and outline the subvolume creation for BTRFS. Very simple: home, cache, log, and root, and that's it. I do provide time shift in the default applications. So time shift will enable you to do system snapshots, and having the mount command create, I think, sane defaults for the subvolumes will help with that. In packages, this is really the only change that I made to these calamari settings since the last ISOs, is I added Calamares to the list of packages to remove at the end of installation. This removal of packages, and we'll get to it when we're take a look here, it is removing packages. Let's toggle the log here. See what we're doing. Okay. During the removal of packages, part of the process is to remove and purge the during the apt-get remove command, as well as run for all of these. For all of these packages, run. Where is it? And auto remove. So that is why the installation process is now taking quite a bit longer. It's doing all of this work that it never did before. However, it's freeing up whatever space all these unneeded packages are that were required by Calamares and now no longer. Very interesting to look at the log here. Okay, let's go back. Nice having the debug feature there. Let's go back to Calamares settings. Under partition, I already explained we're doing a 1 gig EFI system partition. It is being mounted at boot/EFI. We do give the choice of ext4, btrfs, or Xfce during installation, during auto partitioning. Manual partitioning, you can do whatever you want. If you do manual partitioning, though, I believe the default file system is ext4 unless you specify differently. Let's see, what else? I don't think there's anything else all that interesting here. Shell process is the last thing I'll mention. At the end of Calamares, I do remove any leftover files in etc Calamares. And that's about it there. Let's see how we're doing on the installation. We are still waiting on the removal of 8 packages. And I've gone through all of my prepared or anticipated discussion points. I think what I'll do now is just pause the video, wait for this to finish, and then reboot and show you the outcome. Sound good? Okay. Okay, we're back after about 5 more minutes. So I did look at the clock. We were at 8:32 and now we're at 8:36. So maybe 6 minutes. Now, one other change I did was make sure this is unchecked, just because if you're in the habit of just hitting done and not thinking about it, and you didn't want the machine to reboot for some reason, it wouldn't, and then you can just shut down, which is what we're going to do. So done, And then because we're in VirtualBox, and VirtualBox is kind of funky sometimes, we're going to log out first. Because I find sometimes it's a cleaner shutdown when you log out first and now shut down. That's only really affecting VirtualBox. And we're not getting the message to hit enter after the removal of the ISO. So let's just hit enter. Very good. Now let's go over to VirtualBox here. We can see the drive, optical drive is now empty. Let's go ahead and start the VM. And turn off that. We do have the Debian grub here. So let's boot it on up. You can see it's booting up from the Debian kernel 6.1, the current LTS kernel, which Debian 12 will stay on for the life of Debian 12, unless you want a backported kernel or a custom kernel. Debian does provide choices. You can do the real-time kernel, the Lacorics kernel, which is similar to Arch's, I forgot the name, what Arch calls their Zen kernel. So let's log in here with the credentials I selected during the installation. This notification comes up all the time now. It's iBus, I guess, notifying you if you were running on Wayland, but we're not. Okay, let's go and set the screen resolution here. (1440 by 9). Keep. Close. By default, we get the Debian wallpaper. The way I got to my custom wallpapers is desktop settings, backgrounds, and here are all of the wallpapers I provide. Let's go with something nice and soothing. There you go. So there it is, folks. Let's take a quick look at System. We have the Easy Admin tool, which I haven't gotten around to running yet. It does require admin privileges. Haven't gotten around to modifying yet. Some things now are superfluous. You know what I'm trying to say. A, no longer needed since we're now automatically in the sudo group. B is still needed. Optimize the sources list. That really just makes sure that the backports is available and all of the branches, the contrib, non-free, and non-free firmware are all enabled for all repositories. We do want to rebuild the icon cache files. That will help with memory and loading time. Only takes a moment. Just wait for all 6 or 7 icon cache files to get rebuilt. Now the effect you won't see until you log in and log out and log back in. Now from here we can install, if we want, the latest Firefox. Firefox ESR comes with Debian. If you want the latest Firefox, this will grab and install the latest. It will also update to the latest if you've already run this. Install YTDLP. Install newest kernel from backports. If you do want to play with the newer kernel from backports, you can do that right here. If you want to upgrade to testing, you can do that right here. We're not going to do anything else. So X to exit, and we're done. When we reboot, we'll see any benefits of the rebuilt icon cache files. The documentation folder is present on the installed system, so you can use this, modify it, make your own ISOs. Really just as simple as that. Accessories, development tools, games, graphics programs, internet programs, multimedia programs, Office, settings, and system. Take a look at HTOP. Xfce is getting fatter and fatter by the minute. If we open up a terminal and hit neofetch, we can see its output as well. There you go, folks. All of the ISOs are on the my typical download sites, SourceForge.osdn.net, and at the moment, archive.org is being uploaded. So I hope you enjoyed this video look at the changes to the latest EznixOS ISOs. There is also a new EznixOS 11 for people who still want to use Bullseye. Set up very similarly. The version of Calamares in Debian 11 Bullseye is a bit older, lacks some of the features, especially the debug option doesn't work as nicely with the toggle log there. It doesn't have that feature. That older version of Calamares also doesn't give the drop-down choice of file systems. You're stuck with the default, which is ext4. There you go. Hope you enjoyed. Take care. Stay safe. Have fun, folks. Bye-bye.